The Alps loomed like silent giants beneath a slate-gray sky, their jagged peaks swallowed intermittently by swirling snow. The bitter wind carved paths through the valley, howling like a predator hunting its prey. Luca Martins tightened the straps on his backpack, eyes scanning the ridge ahead. 3 days ago, this mountain was just a challenge, an adventure to tick off his list. Now it was a cage, a battlefield, and possibly his grave. The group had set out at dawn, 5 souls united by thrill and trust. Marcus, the grizzled guide whose face was etched by decades of storms. Elsa, the free-spirited photographer who saw beauty in the harshest storms. David, the quiet ex-soldier whose calm belied a mind sharpened by war. And Mikhail, the scientist chasing climate secrets buried in ice. But fate was indifferent. The avalanche struck without warning. The first roar was a low, rolling growl, distant but growing with terrifying speed. Then, like a monstrous tidal wave, snow and ice tore down the slope, obliterating everything in its path. Luca barely had time to dive behind a rock, the crushing weight of snow swallowing the world. Hours later, the storm subsided. Luca awoke, buried but alive, breath shallow, limbs numb, silence, except for the distant cracking of ice and the persistent ringing in his ears. He was alone. Luca's eyelids fluttered open, grit tasting harsh in his mouth. His vision blurred, a pale blue sky through fractured ice catching the sun like broken glass. Panic surged. Was he buried under the mountain? His body screamed cold, yet a stubborn flame of survival ignited inside. He shifted his arm. Pain flared. The snow around him was dense, unforgiving, but there was an air pocket, enough to breathe. He coughed, the sound muffled by layers of frost. Memories crashed in, the roar, the falling snow, his friends. Where were they? Slowly, Luca wriggled free, fingers numb but determined. His backpack, luckily, cushioned the impact, and inside was a small survival kit. He ripped at the snow, each movement a battle against cold and exhaustion. Hours passed. The mountain was merciless. Every breath was a shard of ice, every step a gamble. He stumbled forward, following instinct more than sense, towards the last known camp. The landscape was unrecognizable. Trees snapped like twigs, giant slabs of snow had crushed rocks and earth beneath. The avalanche had rewritten the world. Luca screamed their names, Marcus, Elsa, David, Mikhail, but the only answer was silence. Day 1. After the avalanche, Luca collapsed near what used to be a ridgeline. The snow was tainted, gray churned, broken by shards of wood and stone. Something stuck out, a black strap. His heart thudded. He crawled forward, breath steaming in the frigid air, and pulled. It was a glove, Marcus's glove, but no hand inside. Tears pricked Luca's eyes. Not from grief, not yet. That would come later. This was something deeper, older, the hollow dread of being utterly, truly alone. He forced himself to move. Time was the enemy. The sun, though faint behind clouds, was beginning to dip. Temperatures would plummet, and he needed shelter. The emergency tent, if it survived. He found it wedged between rocks, one side torn. The poles snapped, but it was better than nothing. Inside, he buried himself in thermal blankets, hands shaking as he lit the small burner from his pack. The flame flickered weakly, but gave a thin halo of warmth. He took out the radio. Dead. No signal. Not even static. Outside, the wind picked up again. That night, Luca lay still, listening to the mountain breathe around him, a long, slow exhale that sounded far too much like death. Day 2. The search begins. He rose before sunrise, what little sleep he'd managed disrupted by nightmares of suffocation and screams beneath snow. The wind had settled, a deadly calm. He packed what he could salvage. The tent was mostly useless now, his food half gone. But he had a flare, one energy bar, and a map that now meant almost nothing. Still, he marked where the avalanche hit. If there was any chance someone survived, he would find them. He returned to the disaster zone. Hours passed. He dug with his hands, numb and raw. He found Mikhail's backpack, ripped open, notebooks soaked and unreadable. Then, under a collapsed pine tree, a glimpse of red fabric. Elsa. She was there, curled, frozen, Her eyes open, he sat with her for a long time, not crying, just being. He took the camera from her hand. Somehow it still worked. The lens cracked, but the screen lit up. She had taken photos just before the avalanche, breathtaking shots of the sky, the ice glinting like crystal, her friends laughing in candid smiles. It hurt to look at them. He buried her under a cairn of stones. It felt absurd, useless, but it was all he could do. That night he didn't use the burner. He let the cold in, let it bite, as punishment, as reminder. He whispered to the dark, "I'm still here." Day 3. Into the silence. By morning, Luca had stopped looking at the sky for help. He knew better now. Rescue wasn't coming, not soon enough. The storm system that followed the avalanche had shut down any chance of aerial search. He'd heard Marcus talk about it before. The Alps are cruel in silence. The mountain swallows radio waves, hope, and men. He pressed forward. Snow crunched underfoot, his boots, stiff with frozen water, made each step agony. But he walked anyway, searching for David now. Marcus too, though he feared what he'd find. Not hope, not life, but maybe closure. Around midday, he reached a slope where jagged ice cliffs loomed like frozen teeth. His map called it Roche de la Mort, Rock of Death. No joke. Luca remembered standing here just days ago, joking with David about the name. David had smirked, said, "If I die here, I want it to be dramatic." Luca had laughed. God, they'd all laughed. Now the place looked like a war zone. He spotted a dark mass caught in a ravine. He slid down carefully, knees screaming. His hands were numb, but he recognized the jacket immediately. Dark blue, military issue. David, face down, partially buried. A jagged piece of ice impaled through his ribs. Death had been instant. Luca stared for a long time. He didn't touch him, couldn't. Instead, he sat beside him and talked. He told him about the night sky the day before, about finding Elsa, about how Marcus used to hum old folk songs in his sleep. It was madness, but it kept him sane. Before he left, he took David's survival knife, a parting gift. Something useful, something that meant he wasn't just a body. David was strength. And now, Luca needed it. Day 4. Hunger and shadows. Luca's energy was waning. The final energy bar was gone. His stomach was a hollow pit. Worse, the dizziness had begun, the kind that came with dehydration and cold. The wind picked up again. He found a small ice cave near the base of a cliff and crawled inside. It was tight, the ceiling low, but it blocked the wind. He boiled snow with the burner, sipped slowly. It helped. Then came the memories. Flashback, 2 months earlier, Zurich, a bar by the river. Luca and Marcus sitting by the window, drinks in hand. "You ever wonder why we climb?" Luca had asked, watching the rain hit the glass. Marcus shrugged. "Because it reminds us how small we are. That's a gift. Most people spend their lives pretending they're giants." Luca had smiled. "Or maybe we climb because we're looking for something we lost." Marcus clinked his glass. "Or someone." Back in the cave, Luca clutched the knife. He wasn't looking for his friends anymore. He was looking for Marcus, the last one, maybe the most important one. Day 5. The descent into white. The sky was a flat canvas of ash. No sun, no shadow, just light diffused through an endless dome of snow. Luca had stopped caring about direction. His compass was jammed, the map now a soggy, unreadable mess. He moved by instinct, or maybe desperation. Each breath was a victory. Each step a betrayal of his body's limits. He talked to himself now, whispered names, called out into the nothing. "Marcus," he said, over and over, as if the sound alone could conjure him from the snow. He followed a narrow path between 2 ridges, places they'd scouted early on. There were deep crevices here, dangerous cracks in the ice known as moulins, where meltwater carved tunnels straight down to hell. And that's when he saw it. A flare, a red starburst embedded in the snow, long since burned out, but unmistakable. Someone had used it. He ran, slipped, fell. The slope was slick with packed snow. He tumbled for what felt like forever, arms flailing, ice ripped across his cheek. He slammed against a rock. Pain burst in his shoulder, white hot, then black. Day 6, fire below ice. Luca woke in a void of light. The fall hadn't killed him, somehow, but his arm was dislocated. He could barely breathe. Snow had covered the entrance of the crevasse he now lay in, trapping him. The cold was deeper here, older. It seeped into the bones as if the ice had memory and meant to share it. He screamed, it echoed. Then, movement, a sound, crunching snow, a voice. Luca? He froze. That wasn't possible. He turned slowly, dizzy with pain. From the dark, a shape emerged, stumbling into view. Marcus, barely standing, face frost-bitten, eyes wild and hollow. They stared at each other, then collapsed into each other's arms, more out of gravity than embrace. Marcus. They didn't speak for hours, just sat huddled around a tiny flame made from scavenged twigs and bits of fabric. Marcus had survived by sheer madness. He'd fallen into the crevasse during the avalanche and stayed there, eating snow, rationing a half-eaten protein bar, whispering songs to himself in the dark. I thought I was the last, Marcus said finally. You were almost right, Luca replied. They both laughed. It sounded like breaking glass. Day 7, the last climb. Marcus shared the last half-bag of trail mix like it was sacred. Marcus's lips were cracked, his skin raw from exposure. Luca's shoulder was worse than before, swollen, darkening, every movement laced with searing pain. They both knew the truth. If they didn't descend now, they'd never descend at all. We head for the ridge, Marcus said, voice low, steady. There's an old climber's shelter about 8 kilometers east. If it wasn't buried, it might still be intact. And if it is? We die under the stars, Marcus said simply. But not here, not in this hole. They climbed, not up, but across, navigating a slanting traverse along a wind-scoured cliff edge. The sky had darkened again, and snow began to fall. Not thick, not loud, but quiet. Gentle, as if the mountain had grown tired of rage. Halfway across the cliff face, Luca slipped. He caught himself with his good arm, body dangling over a 50-foot drop. His feet scrabbled, boots scraping ice. Marcus crawled back, reached down, gripped him hard. You let go, I go too, Marcus growled. Luca gritted his teeth. You're an idiot. I was your idiot long before this. With a final heave, Marcus pulled him up. They lay there, gasping, laughing like lunatics. Then the snow began to fall harder. The shelter. They reached it by dusk, a squat stone hut half buried under a frozen drift. The door was jammed. Marcus hacked through the ice with David's knife until it cracked open. Inside was darkness, dust, silence, and a miracle. A steel emergency crate, inside 3 cans of condensed soup, a packet of crackers, a portable radio, and a folded note. For the next ones, stay warm. Don't give up. Dated 1997. Marcus laughed till he cried. Luca collapsed onto the floor, eyes burning. They lit a small fire in the hearth with pages from a tattered logbook and melted snow in an old pot. The soup was metallic and lukewarm. It tasted like heaven. Day 8, radio silence. The radio crackled to life the next morning. Nothing but static, until a voice broke through. Rescue operations, Bernina sector. Any survivors, please respond. Luca scrambled for the dial, twisting knobs with frozen fingers. Here, Shelter 7, Roche de la Morte sector. 2 survivors, Luca Martins, Marcus Geller, requesting immediate evac. Silence. Then, copy that. Hold position. Extraction team inbound. 12 hours. They didn't speak. They just held each other's gaze, dazed and trembling. 12 hours. After everything, just 12 hours more. The long wait. 12 hours. It sounded so simple, survivable, almost easy. But time bends when you're starving, wounded, and waiting in silence. Luca stared at the frost gathering along the edges of the shelter walls. Each breath turned into fog. His shoulder throbbed with every heartbeat, now infected, hot to the touch. Marcus wasn't doing much better. Frostbite had spread across 2 toes, and his cough had deepened into a hollow rattle. They passed time the only way broken men can, by remembering. Flashback, 1 year ago Zermatt, a summer climb. Luca and Marcus sitting at the edge of a cliff, legs swinging over the void, drinking schnapps from a dented tin flask. Marcus had asked, what happens if we die on one of these climbs? Luca had shrugged. We won't. We're too careful. Marcus grinned. You know better. One day it's going to be just a bit too cold, a bit too steep. Luca sipped the drink. Then I hope I'm with someone who doesn't let go. Marcus leaned in. I wouldn't. Back in the shelter, silence. The radio had gone quiet again. Just static. The storm outside had worsened. Snow pounded the roof in waves. Wind screamed like it was mourning the dead. Marcus lay wrapped in a blanket, staring at the ceiling. You think we'll be the same? Luca didn't answer. After this, I mean, if we get out. I think, Luca said finally, we'll never climb again. Not like before. Marcus nodded slowly. Neither of them could say why, but they both understood. Some things you don't come back from. Hour 11. The wind died. The sky began to clear. The sun cracked through the gray for the first time in days, spilling light like liquid gold across the snow. Luca stood outside the shelter, squinting toward the horizon. Then he heard it. Rotors. Distant at first, then louder, echoing against the valley walls. He staggered back inside. They're coming. Marcus didn't move, just closed his eyes. Luca shook him. Hey, Marcus. His friend blinked, barely conscious. We're going home, Luca whispered. Do you hear me? The helicopter landed in a small clearing 100 meters downhill. It couldn't get closer. The rescuers had to hike in on foot. When the medics arrived, they found two emaciated, frostbitten men wrapped in layers of scorched nylon and torn jackets. One had a dislocated shoulder. The other couldn't walk, but they were alive. They lifted them out by stretcher. As the chopper rose, Luca looked down at the mountain, now calm, quiet, glistening under the morning sun. Beneath that snow were three friends. Elsa, David, Mikhail. He whispered their names. The wind took them. Homecoming Zurich General Hospital was a world apart. Clean walls, warm blankets, machines that beeped, nurses with gentle hands, the hum of modern life, so distant from the primal stillness of the mountain. Luca didn't speak for the first day or the second. He lay in his hospital bed, shoulder immobilized, body recovering slowly. Marcus was 2 rooms down, toes amputated, lungs inflamed, but somehow still cracking jokes with the nurses. He even flirted between coughing fits. Luca listened through the wall, smiling once. Just once. The news broke quickly. Tragedy in the Alps, 3 dead, 2 survived deadly avalanche. Miracle survivors of Valdez Ridge disaster tell their story. Exclusive, avalanche survivor speaks out. But Luca didn't speak out. He ignored the press, turned off the TV, wouldn't read the headlines. What was there to say? They were gone. No sentence, no interview could make that less true. Survivor's guilt. A week after his discharge, Luca returned home, a small apartment overlooking Lake Zurich. He stood in the shower for an hour, steam rising like ghosts around him. He unpacked his gear slowly, the broken radio, David's knife, Elsa's cracked camera. He powered it on. The last photo, the group smiling, unaware. He fell to the floor and wept. Marcus's visit. Marcus came by one day, leaning on crutches, face thinner but eyes as sharp as ever. They didn't talk much, just sat on the balcony drinking hot tea, watching snow fall softly over the city. Do you think they suffered? Luca asked eventually. Marcus was quiet. No, he said. I think the mountain took them fast. They sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus stood. We should go back someday. Luca stared. What? Are you serious? Not to climb, to bury them properly when the snow melts. Luca didn't reply, but he nodded. Returned to the mountain, 6 months later. The snow had receded. The mountain, though still dangerous, stood quiet beneath a summer sun. Luca and Marcus climbed again, not with ice axes and summit dreams, but with quiet purpose. This wasn't a conquest. It was a pilgrimage. Their movements were slower now. Marcus had adapted to his prosthetic boots, walking with a limp but fierce determination. Luca's shoulder, though healed, ached with each step, a ghostly reminder. The landscape was both familiar and foreign. Trees had regrown in patches. The ridges were carved differently, as if the mountain, too, remembered what had happened and bore the scars. They followed the same route as before the memorial site. They found it in a clearing above a frozen stream, where Elsa had last stood with her camera. The stones they had used to mark her resting place were still there, weathered, undisturbed. They added new ones. On each stone, they etched initials with David's knife. EL for Elsa Lorenz, DS for David Steiner, MK for Mikhail Kovalenko. Marcus lit a small fire. Luca placed 3 photos, laminated now, beside the cairn. One of the group laughing, one of Elsa with her camera, one of the night sky, stars blazing. They didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. That night they camped nearby, staring at the stars. I kept thinking, Marcus murmured. Why us? Why not one of them instead? Luca exhaled. I stopped asking. The mountain doesn't care who lives or dies. But we do, Marcus said. And that was the truth. Closure. When they hiked down the mountain the next morning, Luca paused one last time to look back at the peak. It wasn't an enemy anymore. Not a monster. It was a grave. But also a teacher. He had gone there seeking adventure. Instead, he found the truth, that survival isn't about strength or skill. It's about pain, about loss, about carrying those who didn't make it with you forever. 1 year later, the Alps stood serene beneath a pale spring sky, snow resting gently on their peaks like a soft sigh. Somewhere deep among those ridges, memories slept in ice, laughter, fear, courage, and silence. Luca Martins hadn't climbed in a year. He now lived in a small town near Lucerne, in a modest house filled with quiet. No gear on the walls, no summit flags, just books, photographs, and windows that opened wide to the lake. He taught wilderness survival to young climbers. Not the kind of survival that's about knots and crampons, but the kind that lives in your mind. The kind that whispers, you have to keep going, even when the world disappears under you. A letter each year. On the anniversary of the Avalanche, Luca wrote 3 letters. He never sent them. One to Elsa, describing the colors of the sunrise that morning and how the clouds moved like dancers over the lake. One to David, about how he used the knife every day, not in battle, but to carve wooden animals for neighborhood children. One to Mikhail, telling him that his research notes had been passed on, that others were studying them now. His life's work wouldn't be forgotten. The final image. Luca kept one photograph framed in his living room, a battered print from Elsa's cracked camera. The 5 of them, arms around each other, standing on a snow ridge, eyes bright. It was taken just 20 minutes before the avalanche. Behind them, mountains. Above them, clouds. Around them, wind and light. It wasn't a photo of death waiting. It was life at its loudest, raw, imperfect, brilliant. The mountain endures. Luca sometimes visited the base of Valdez Ridge. He would sit and watch the wind move across the snow, remembering the ones who didn't come home. And though pain still lived in his chest, it no longer ruled him. He was not just a survivor. He was a bearer of memory, a keeper of stories, because the mountain had taken so much, but it had left him with something too. The knowledge that life is not measured by how high we climb, but by who we carry with us after the fall.